guys, is it better for me to be standing, sitting? How do you see?
No, be comfortable.
I'd say where you're comfortable. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm comfortable.
Okay.
You're comfortable.
Yeah, it's such a small group.
Yes, it is.
So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Elise Lawson. I have been part of my former business partner John Severance and I started Watershed to Wildlife in 2000. And in fact, Dalton was our first natural resource inventory. We got a grant from the Connecticut River Joint Commissions. So we had to, that was in 2001, and we had to focus on, the Connecticut River area. And then we did an update to that NRI, more town inclusive, in 2005. And we also, some really other cool projects we did in Dalton were in 2004, we did a Chase Bog Brook in the wetland complex study throughout the Chase Bog Brook, which was incredible. And we used to call it the gem of Dalton. And then we followed that up a couple years later. That was in 2004. We partnered with North Country Council and did a town-wide wetland study. So it's been a while, but since I've been in Dalton, for work stuff. But it was great to come back. So thank you. And this is a great small group. I want you guys just to feel free to ask questions, interrupt me. It can be more discussion based. Anytime. So this is a set of our project milestones that we completed for this project, and it included, which this may be helpful for you, Margaret. Basically, I compiled all the existing data from studies we've done and data that's available online. I then created a map, which I gave to the Dalton Conservation Commission, of areas based on looking at the GIS data initially in the mapping software. I came up with areas where I wanted to visit for field work. And then I relied on you guys of the commission to get landowner permission, because one thing we take very seriously are landowner rights, and we did not trespass on private property without prior permission from landowners. So I had 3 days of field work, and where we collected data to help with the inventory and looked at everything from different habitat types and plant communities, riparian habitat, wetlands, scenic view, anything, cultural resources we found, we would document that, invasive species, and kind of also taking a look at wildlife travel corridors and that sort of thing. Once the field work is done, I bring in that data and integrate that into the existing mapping software, and we did sort of mapping analysis, looking at the mapping analysis of resources, natural resources throughout town, and then created several maps, and then following that comes the report, the NRI report, and I submitted a draft to the Conservation Commission to review, and thank you so much for taking the time to review that. And then the final report. And this public presentation is kind of the last step of this NRI. This is just a list of some of the data and tools that I used for this project. I really love using both aerial photography and topo maps, kind of as base maps for the GIS software. I use the GIS software I use is called ArcMap, which is an Esri product. And many of the towns have that product, so the data created will integrate into, if you have that, it's easily integrated into these products, which most towns have. I downloaded all the data, again, from previous studies and from Granite. And Granite is sort of a statewide warehouse of GIS data that's available to the public, and it's housed by UNH. So downloaded that, and then out in the field, well, I have digital camera listed there, but really my phone is way better than my digital camera. So I used my phone to take pictures, and I have a program on my phone called Avenza Maps, which is great because I can actually collect a GPS point where I am, and then between the photos and the GPS point, and then I use just old-fashioned field book to make notes. And then all of this helps when I go back to do the mapping, finalize the mapping, and write the report, having that data. And then I also just use standard Windows software like this PowerPoint. I use Word and Excel, and that sort of thing. So this is a 2015 aerial photograph that I used a lot, and the Johns River is, what an amazing area. You can see the Johns River and where it flows into the Connecticut. We're kind of in the northern tip of, can you see this okay, Margaret?
Yeah, I'm just struck by how
squiggly it
Yeah,
is.
and all the wetlands around it, it's incredible. Yeah. Really, really cool spot.
wow.
And it's right in the north corner of Dalton, right by Lancaster. And now we'll go to the other corner of Dalton, and we're looking sort of in the southern tip. We've got Forest Lake, half of it's in Dalton and half in Whitefield, and the state park. And these topo maps are dated, but it's a great tool for when you're going out into the field, or using as a base map just to look at different features. So I like using the aerial photos and that. And then this is what I use. This is just like a worldwide, you get this, it's like a worldwide map you can download, and it's kind of a muted tone, so it's a good base map for some of the maps I created. And it has a few features like Dalton Mountain and some of the lakes and the rivers labeled, so it's a nice base map. And when I'm out in the field, again, I'm taking these GPS points. I have like yellow, orange, and red little dots, and those are GPS points that I took out in the field, and each color represents a different day I was out there. So here I was in the David Dana Forest, and then that last day, Nancy, when we were we walked around this little pond,
Yes,
Beaver
yes.
Pond. Yeah.
Across from French Road.
Yeah, right, that's right. So you can just see kind of, this is just a part of the town where we went for field work. And we have our lovely field crew, and John and Nancy. I was really grateful to have you guys join me in the field. And I mean, you both know your town and knew where you wanted to go too. And Nancy, you were an amazing tour guide, so I really appreciate you joining me all 3 days. Thank you so much.
It was my pleasure.
Well, I was great. I had a wonderful time. I wish I had more days out there. The field is fun, except we did have a lot of ticks.
Oh,
A lot of
and
ticks.
John, you didn't, right? That
Did
day
you?
we were out. No,
Oh,
and he was like trying to run away from us because we had so many ticks. Not really, but no.
What time of year was it?
Well, that was the first outing, right?
Yeah,
So
Nancy and I went out once in October, no problem. But then we did 2 days in May, early May and late May, and both of those were pretty
yeah,
ticky.
bad.
Yeah, in fact, I might think about that. Like, the thing with the May one is a lot of vernal pools,
Right.
which is what I want to see. It's
Right.
great to be able to see that, but I might, when I'm talking to towns, I might try to, like have at least one in May so you can document some vernal pools, but then have them a little later in the year when the ticks die down, because they were horrendous.
Yeah, it was a rough year.
Yeah, but it was great to have people with me. And I also wanted to have a shout out for the BioBlitz that you guys held on May 20th. It wasn't officially part of the NRI, but it sure complemented the NRI that I did. I wasn't there, but you had 81 different species observed, and this is beaked hazelnut, which is a really important wildlife food, full of protein and fat, and then we have sphagnum moss and striped maple and wood sorrel, just some of the things that these guys found. Most people were on the David Dana Forest. There were some observations from other parts of town, but most of it was on the David Dana Forest. And you got, nothing particularly rare was found, but you did find some blue cohosh, which is not common in New Hampshire, and it does indicate that the soil might be a little sweeter, a little higher pH. So there could be some rare plants in there too. It'd be interesting to check back a different time of year and see what you find. Yeah. So, and there is another BioBlitz on October 21st, 2023, from 9 to noon. So it was great, and I used a lot of it in the report too, so it was great compliment.
You guys are welcome to join us.
Yeah, it's open. And then I just have a few photos from our field work. The top left of the Connecticut River. I didn't spend a lot of time on the Connecticut River for this NRI, but it is a designated river. There were so many other places we could go, but it was good to visit it in a few places and see that. And right near there on the top right, that's part of what you noticed, Margaret, of the Johns River. That's a little wetland off the Johns River. There was some active beaver sign in there. We're actually walking on an old railway bed and we had a great view of these really cool wetlands, and you can see all the different wetland types, including the river, and it was and upland habitat, but amazing, really cool spot. Yeah. And then John and Nancy and I were driving along, I can't remember the name of the road, but Nancy's like, oh, we should go slow here because I often see a bear in the field. And right on cue, there was a black bear in the middle of the field. So
Assignments?
Yeah.
Was it?
No, Blakesley Road.
Blakesley.
We looped up Blakesley Road.
Yeah, right at the start of our field day.
I'm like, hey, that's there.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. And
yeah,
then
it was great.
he stuck around a little bit for me to at least get a picture, but I wish I had a really good camera with a good telephoto lens. But anyway, in the lower right is the old gold mine on the David Dana Forest, which it wasn't a super productive from what I read, but it was a gold mine nevertheless. They say that it went down 100 feet. And there's a trail that leads right to it.
Yeah.
Really cool spot.
Yeah, it is a cool spot. It's just nice forest there. It's so pretty. Yeah,
It's beautiful.
It's worth a trip in.
Yeah, it's really beautiful, Margaret.
Yeah.
So you've never been to David Dana?
I've never walked around in there.
You should join us on the 21st.
It's
It's a great little hike.
It's beautiful. Yeah, it's really
it's a nice walk.
Yeah. And it's not super rugged either.
No, not at all.
It's
It's
very
a little wet. in
yeah.
some parts.
It is. Yeah. And we have of course, a painted turtle in Nancy's pond, and this is one of the vernal pools, one of the new vernal pools we documented on the lower right. It's hard to see. There's actually salamander egg masses and wood frog egg masses in there, and that's in Forest Lake State Park. So that was kind of fun. We found, I think we documented 3 at least in Forest Lake State Park. Yeah, I think so. This one was right by the road, that photo. But the other thing that I kind of forgot about, that I loved about driving around Dalton, is pretty much every road you drive on has these amazing views because it's such a hilly topography, and and these open fields help help create just even more dramatic vistas. Really, really beautiful.
It's a great picture you took at the top.
Yeah.
That was on Mountain Road, wasn't it?
Yeah, and you guys have access to all these photos too. This is all part of any that you want to use.
Well, we're going to try and get
yours.
the document actually uploaded to the
good
website, so then that way anyone can look at the digital copies. Yeah. And then we'll get a copy printed.
And you
put
guys
out
are
in the
able
town
to
hall.
see everything that I had in Dropbox, right? You're able to see the photos and all the data and take what you want. Because I could also, when I did Randolph's NRI, I gave them this little memory key thing that you could plug into your computer. But it's so small that they lost it. So I was like, well, if you keep it online, you can just download what you want and you don't have to
Well, and
download.
that's what we can upload to the Facebook page or group page. So, because I know
That's true.
Jeanette has said obviously we have limited data on
The town website.
town site, but
Yeah, because I have a ton of pictures. Not all are great, but you get a
so you
feel.
download and just drop them into an album,
Sure, it's
and
a
then
good
that way
idea.
they're there.
Yep.
What direction are we looking at in the top photograph?
I believe.
South?
That's towards Wakefield.
South?
It's towards Wakefield, yeah.
Or is that east? Or
Presidential ranges.
southeast?
So that was not too long after we saw the bear further up that road.
Well, we were on,
And,
we were on
Blakesley.
Blakesley Loop Road, and then did we cut across that little
I think that's from Mountain Road.
Yeah, that is from.
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
definitely
okay.
From Mountain Road.
That's why I
So looking south.
think that's south or southeast.
What's the water? Burns Pond?
Where? Oh, up there. Well, there's you can see Forest Lake and Burns Pond from up
Oh.
there.
Mount Washington
Yeah.
is just off.
Yeah.
Came off the picture to the
Yeah.
right.
Okay, off that
Right,
way.
right.
And this was taken like May 9th, so the leaves weren't fully out yet in here. Yeah. And this one is, you can see this was on a private landowner, and but one of the things you can see here as you look out is over 81% of Dalton is forested. And this particular landowner, this used to be all forested, but they've reclaimed these fields for wildlife habitat, and it does it's wonderful wildlife habitat now to have these fields again, but it also creates these dramatic views. And here we're looking, I'm trying to picture more.
Looking towards the Connecticut.
Yeah, it's the Connecticut Valley, but I think that's, I was thinking that was one of the presidentials.
Oh, I see. Okay.
With the snow.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
gonna be
That'd be.
Washington, maybe.
on the side.
And one of my favorite places, it was great to be back on the last day of fieldwork. We went down, this is Chase Bog Brook, which runs along kind of the southern part of Dalton, and it enters the Johns River. Actually, it enters the Johns River in Whitefield, but then it comes right back into Dalton and runs up kind of in a northwesterly direction, right along kind of the eastern part of Dalton. But the Chase Bog Brook is incredible. The part, we only went into one part. A lot. I think a lot of the ownership has changed since the study that John and I did in 2004. But it's surrounded by dense softwood stands, and dense softwood includes like balsam fir and spruce and cedar, and it's really important habitat for deer and moose and snowshoe hare and many species, because it reduces the snow depth, it reduces crust. And it also adds like a thermal barrier when it's windy and really cold. So, and just great travel corridor. But the other thing I love about this picture is we're actually looking towards the top of Dalton Mountain, and there's so many different forested habitats in there. Remember, Nancy, we were seeing these little kind of grayish?
Yeah.
It was poplar blossoms. I was like, what? Because at first I was like, that looks like almost like a rock outcrop, but it was poplar, aspen blossoms. And you can see like there's some dense softwood stands, there's pine and kind of rock outcrop areas, there's hardwood and mixed wood forest. It's really cool, and it's a lot of open space for wildlife to travel around. And I'm not an archaeologist, but anytime we see some cool cultural resources, I love to document it. The right photo is a really neat cellar hole that was very intact on a private property, and they're scattered throughout town here and there. And then this is just like an old box culvert under a railway bridge built with, our granite, and it's in beautiful condition. Like, it holds up better than our plastic culverts we use today. That's not going anywhere. So, and I don't need to bore you with this. This is in the report and it's in this handout, but it's basically just a summary of kind of the analysis work and the percentages. It doesn't have everything, but it has most or a lot of the natural resources and the percentages in town. A couple of things I did want to note is that when I looked back at our last NRI that you guys had in town, the dense softwood, the percentage of dense softwood in town has gone up. And then on the other hand, permanent wildlife openings, that's gone down from the last NRI by, a couple of percentage points. Not significant. And some of it could have been error. I feel like for this NRI, I was using aerial photos that had better resolution, so digitizing the dense softwood stands was easier, and Also, I remember last time, at the last NRI, digitizing the permanent openings, and some of them could have been clear cuts, which aren't maintained. And although they're initially, when a clear cut's done, it's initially services is that it'll grow up quickly into forested again. So that's probably the difference, was just not sure if it was a field or clear cut when we did it before. But and also of note are the steep slopes in town. As you guys know, there's over 34% of town has over a 20% slope, so that's pretty steep. In comparison, Whitefield, I have it in my notes. Whitefield has much less. Let me see if I can. Oh yeah, so in comparison, Whitefield has has 10%, almost 11% that's over 20%, and 3% of the town is over 30% slope. So it's a huge difference, you know, and then therefore there are more wetlands in Whitefield too, because you just have flatter depressions.
We have a mountain.
You have a mountain through town, yeah, and several other hills, yeah.
Well, Whitefield doesn't have a mountain.
Right.
What's the conservation land?
Oh yeah,
1,000 acres.
I can. So conservation land. Do I have that up here? Yeah, I have.
Number 2.
Yeah. So 11, just over 11% of town.
Right.
And
I
we're.
wondered what it is.
Oh, number of acres.
Yeah, well.
Oh, I can show you.
You got a
Yeah.
breakdown in there.
I can show you. There's a breakdown in the report, and then if you have the report, if you look at one of the maps in the back.
Okay.
One of them has conservation land, and it won't be that one, but I can't remember the number, which number. But if you look through, you can see there is one particular landowner who is considering increasing the land under conservation, but hasn't done that yet officially. So we'll see. But that has increased. The amount of conservation land has increased from the last.
Oh, yeah.
Are you seeing it?
Yep.
Very different than Bethlehem, which has White Mountain National Forest.
Well, yeah. That doesn't really, well, I don't want to say it doesn't count, but it's different.
It's different, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So, onto the recommendations. Dalton has over 74 miles of streams, and the protection of this water quality, both streams, rivers, and some lakes, it is important. And it's not just the big, like the lower right is the Connecticut River. It's not just the big bodies of water like the Connecticut River that's important, but this little headwater stream coming out of a beaver pond eventually enters the Johns River. You know, by having good buffers and helping with that water quality, if that water quality is damaged, it's going to flow into the Connecticut and cause problems downstream. So these little headwater brooks are also really important. And 3 different types of bodies of water here. We have Forest Lake, which clearly water quality is important ecologically, but it's also a destination for recreation. There are houses around it. There are people who swim and canoe, kayak. So having the water quality goes beyond protecting it ecologically here, but this does eventually flow into Burns Lake and then the Johns River and the Connecticut River. And then the photo on the lower right is a smaller pond. This is the one across from French Road. It's kind of along the road that goes between Whitefield and Dalton. And a great beaver pond. There was active beaver in there. It's got dense softwoods all around it. It's almost...
It's over by Ted Ingerson's gravel pit.
Right across from
right across. Yeah. And it's bisected by an old railway bed there too. So you on either side of the railway bed is some small bodies of water. And then in contrast, this vernal pool on Nancy and Bob Camo's property, is really small. I bet it didn't dry up this year though, did it?
No.
Yeah.
It couldn't have.
Because most of them are drying up in the summer, but I bet not this year.
Yeah.
But this vernal pool, I have never seen a vernal pool. I've done several vernal pool studies and have documented them for towns over the years. I have never seen a vernal pool with that many egg masses in it.
Yeah, hers is incredible.
Incredible.
Yeah,
It really is.
it was all hemlock. We have a hardwood vernal pool,
Yeah.
and then the hemlock. And the hemlock one is the most interesting, I think. Yeah.
So many
Yeah.
so there were blue
because of
spotted
the hemlock?
salamanders and
Is it
yellow.
because of that, the hemlock?
That it's different, you mean?
Yeah.
Or- yeah.
I just thought-
That's my
I haven't-
theory.
I've been- yeah, go ahead.
I bet, yeah, like I bet the water is cooler.
Mhm.
It might have been a little deeper. Salamanders need a little more time.
Yeah, because it's always opens later than
Yeah.
the hardwood.
Yeah. The hardwood might be better for wood frogs
Yeah.
or fairy shrimp or that sort of thing, but this one is really good for the salamanders. And they have just all this great habitat with all buffers all around it. And the salamanders like the forest. They're mole salamanders, so they actually live under the debris and under logs, and so it's perfect habitat for that. So, yeah, I love that picture.
Yeah, thanks for taking us out there though, because it really was. a nice
Yeah.
field- It was a really nice field
Really
trip.
cool. Yeah. And another it follows that it's not just surface water, but you want to be thinking about our aquifers. And this I just wanted to point out over here. This is Chase Bog Brook and the Johns River up to the Connecticut, and that's all one big aquifer with the different colors, like the lighter blobs, I'll call them, in the northern part of Dalton. That's transmissivity rate, which is the amount of flow of water under there, the amount of water. And it would follow that by the Johns River and the Connecticut River floodplain area, you're going to have just a higher valued aquifer there. So, and a lot of, Dalton and neighboring towns, this water supply is very important both now and in the future. So trying to protect that areas would be pretty cool. And this is, another recommendation is just thinking about our forested lands and continuing to protect these dense softwood stands. This isn't dense softwood stand, this is more a mixed forest, but this is very typical of what you see in Dalton with a really well done logging job that had happened a few years ago. And another thing that I wanted to bring up as something for the town to consider is there's an organization called Northeast Forest Carbon, and thinking about carbon offset programs, it's basically what it is trees take in carbon dioxide, and so they are taking it out of our atmosphere. And northern New England, like upstate New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, have some of the best forests for taking in carbon dioxide. And so the way a carbon offset program works is when you have industry, say, that is creating carbon dioxide and putting it in the atmosphere, they have to pay money for permitting for this, and to produce this carbon dioxide. So they are paying money into these programs, and these programs are offering landowners can then by protecting their land, if they're part of a program, you can be paid per acre to keep your land forested. It doesn't mean that you can't, you can still have sustainable timber harvest, you can still have a timber harvest, but it just means you can't, pave it and put in a Walmart or a shopping center or whatever. You commit for a certain number of years to keep your land forested. And again, this is a very busy slide. This is in that website, but I just wanted to show you these are just a few of the agencies that can offer, basically it's an incentive for a landowner to keep your property undeveloped. And it can be, as small as 30 acres.
I was just gonna ask that.
What's that?
I was just gonna ask that.
Yeah,
me too.
yeah. Depending on, it's worth looking into. It can be as little as 30 acres. There have been some. It has happened. There's a very large tract of land that's part of like upstate New York, and it goes into Canada, into Ontario, and several thousand acres, and that is doing this program. You know, they are getting paid to keep that as it is, but people are realizing, you know, many towns, there's not a lot of big landowners that have thousands of acres, so there are organizations which are looking at as little as 30 or 40 acres. Like there's this one of them is Forest Carbon Works, and you commit for a certain period of time, like you might commit for 20 years or 30 or 40 years, and then, but you do have to have a certain number of acres, and they also want a forester to come check out your property and determine how it is working, in terms of, you know, it's not just looking at trees. You want to look at the soil, and you want to look at the debris on the ground, and it's quite complicated. There are webinars on this that you could just watch that can tell you about it. But I think two things, like one of the recommendations that I've had for the town is that you try to develop a community forest, and purchasing land to have as a community a town forest. And it could be you know, you can make money from a timber harvest as well, but which doesn't necessarily mean, and you can still do this carbon offset program. So it is a way to generate, or at least offset some costs. It's not huge, but it, you know, something to consider. With that, it is still young. I've been talking about this to other towns, and even in the town where I'm on my own conservation commission, and it's still kind of young, and it'll be interesting to see where it goes, but I hope that it becomes a little easier for people to do and more interest in it. We'll see. But it is just something to think about. And switching back to wetlands, we're back here in the Johns River area. There is, you know, over 15% of the town contains wetlands, and that data was obtained from National Wetland Inventory, which is produced by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And I also digitized, looking at the recent aerial photos, I digitized additional wetlands. So that's taking those both into account. I think it's actually maybe underrepresenting the number of wetlands in town, because it is hard to digitize and know if you're looking at a forested wetland or not. But that's where the NRCS soil maps also come in and help. So, and you know, I think continuing to look at wetland studies and continuing to update wetlands and the mapping in town is would be beneficial too. And you know, one of the things, every town that I've worked in, I kind of have like this epiphany of something like, oh my God, you know, we were onto this so long ago. But this is the wetland study that John and I did in 2006, and I'm not sure if you can see it, Margaret, but there's numbers, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I can see the ones that are on yellow.
Yeah, so the yellow. So what we did is we looked at wetlands throughout town, and then we went into some that we figured were larger and higher ranked wetlands, and we did like a functional assessment of the wetlands, and then we came out with this ranking system. So it looks at both the functionality of the wetland, but it also looks at the size. So in this situation, there's a lot of wet soil down here. The Chase Bog Brook area came out number 1. The Johns River, you know, right near where it goes into the Connecticut, came out number 2. And then this is actually Cushman Brook area, and Cushman Brook goes straight into the Connecticut, but that came out 3. And then this is, there's Forest Lake. This is either a tributary to or Alder Brook, and that came out 4 in the wetland study. Fast forward, you know, 17 years. And in this study, what I have here is, not sure if you can see it, Margaret, but the lighter green
I can see that.
are the existing conservation lands.
Okay.
And then the bright kind of gaudy pink the gaudy pink and the darker green are taken from the New Hampshire Wildlife Action Plan.
Okay.
And that is the tier 1 and tier 2 to look at areas for you know, just thinking about important areas in town, basically. And that is done at a, the Fish and Game does a great job, but it is also done mostly by looking at the mapping world, not the field verification stuff. So it was kind of cool to say, yeah, so the same, very similar 4 areas. One of the maps I have in the report is, areas that I consider a priority for conservation. And the Johns River, particularly near where it enters the Connecticut, the Chase Bog Brook area, kind of west of Forest Lake, where the tributary to Alder Brook, which goes into the Ammonoosuc, and then also this Cushman Brook area. And some of that isn't just because of the brooks, but it's also the associated land around it that right now is kind of undeveloped. So that I was like, whoa, look at that. That's pretty cool. And then, this can be tricky, but I had to put in there, with all your beautiful views, just looking at hillside and viewshed protection. And, I would recommend looking at, is there just evaluating what you have for zoning ordinances in town to try to conserve some of these beautiful views. Because this is not only do we, people who live in Dalton love it because of this, the natural resources and the scenic beauty, but it's also a tourist attraction, and that brings a lot of people up here to see. So, but of course you have to factor in landowner rights too when you're thinking about that. So, and then this is just a slide of kind of talking about what are you going to do with this NRI? What can we do with that? Easily you can take excerpts of it for your master plan. I'm always a proponent of sharing your data with neighboring towns. Like I did Lancaster's NRI in 2020, and I did Whitefield's last year, and they all, can all work together and look at my kind of a watershed approach to things. You can work with a planning board to look at sort of, least impact sites for development, if development proposals come through. A lot of people at wind farms or cell towers, how to find locations for that. And one of the things I've also always advocated for towns is it would be really cool to have like a workstation, like at the library or at the town, where you could have all this data up and people could, okay, I'm interested in what can I do with my property, or what's on, people can learn about what they have on their property, or if you're interested in buying a property. Maybe that's a little dated because you can do a lot of this online too now, so maybe you don't need that, but it's kind of a cool, just neat to be able to, I love looking at that and looking at if I'm interested in buying a piece of property, what's there, just to help think about that. And, the other thing with this NRI is, we came up with a list of recommendations, and you can kind of, in the future, you can leverage these recommendations for grants. And you can say, well, actually, we did an NRI in 2023, and we came up with that. We really need to update our, say, wetland study. So, a granting agency will say, oh, yeah, you've got like an action plan that you're going to try to accomplish. And it could make it, hopefully, it would make it easier for you to be able to get some of those grants, too.
I think we should put Gina in charge of that.
Writing grants is not particularly fun.
Do not
but
do that. That is not my experience. It's hard.
It is hard. It's really hard. Yeah, it takes time.
Yeah.
And that's all I have right now. I did want to share that when we did our first NRI for Dalton, we went one of the days we canoed the length of the Connecticut through Dalton, and we no longer had we put in when we saw this little guy right on the side. And then during the second NRI, do you remember, Nancy? It was like November. That's a baby snapping turtle. I don't even know where we were in Dalton, but we were somewhere. And that's a dime next to the snapping turtle. Just a little one. So cool. And that moose I took it in Pittsburgh when I was doing a vernal pool study.
cute.
But I love that it's under a stop sign, and it means I stop talking and you can ask questions. So that's what I have for a slideshow. Are there any questions? I can show you some mapping if you want, or we can just, whatever you feel like.
No, that was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
No, thank you.
Good.
Do you have any questions?
I wish other